No, Need for Speed Payback is not trash. I use that title to get your opinion because there's something much more important here to talk about, and that is Need for Speed Payback's review scores. So it's no secret that I've been a fan of the Need for Speed series for a very long time. I went as far as to make a documentary on it. So obviously there's going to be some natural bias behind what I'm saying here because I've been a long time fan of this series. And that goes for multiple games I talk about on the channel. I'm open to admit that. You know, the Horizon series, I always want Horizon to get better. That's why I critique it so hard, because I feel like it has fell off since the first one, and things have been taken out and things have been, you know, changed over the time, which has made that game worse. And the reason why I talk about all these games in such a way, in a critical opinion, is because I want them to get better. I feel like Need for Speed Payback has had unjustified review scores, ones that really don't have a critical opinion as much as they do just an opinion, and there's a difference between the two. So what we're going to go ahead and do in today's video is talk about the review scores, mainly the IGN one, but I guess what I'm going to say can apply to the GameSpot one as well, although I haven't really looked too deep into that one. I'm kind of mainly talking about the IGN review, because again, I just feel like there's some things in that review which are a bit inconsistent, and we're going to talk about everything as a whole, because I've had a problem with a lot of the big articles and the big publications that do reviews for games, because some of them are just old-fashioned and they don't really work the same as they used to, and things have changed in 2017. You know, the way people perceive things, reviews like from IGN and stuff, they're not really as popular as they used to be before. You know, now with social media and YouTubers coming up, people will just look up a Let's Play if they want to buy a game. If they like the look of it, they'll buy it, and things have changed from what they used to be. So what we're going to go ahead and do in this video is break everything down. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get straight into today's video. We're going to open up this video with critical opinions. For me, and this is just me personally, I have a critical opinion, which is my formal based opinion, my professional opinion of the game, and then I always have my normal opinion. For example, Underground 2, in my opinion, tied with Most Wanted 2005, purely based off nostalgia. Now, my critical opinion of that game is it is definitely much worse than 2005, but the reason why I rate it so highly is because of the nostalgia linked to it. Now, obviously, if I was critically going to review the game, and if I was doing a review in 2017, I would give that game a lower score than 2005, even though I enjoyed it the same amount. That is one thing I feel like these reviews really, really lack. Just because I like a game as much as I think I do, doesn't mean it deserves a certain score. Now, whether you like things or not doesn't really matter. You're not reviewing the game for yourself, you're reviewing it for everyone else. Now, when I say this, it makes it sound like I'm jealous or I'm hurt that they didn't give 2015 or Payback for that matter a higher score. But I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is there's a difference between a critical opinion and just an opinion. Like I said, Underground 2 is not as good as 2005 critically. It hasn't got cops. It hasn't got the inclusion of a properly good story, one of the best Need for Speed has had in a very long time. And I'm using those two as an example because those are two very highly acclaimed games in the series. But the point is, there's a difference between liking a game and reviewing a game. So now we've got that out of the way with, let's go ahead and actually talk about the difference and what I actually mean when I'm saying critical opinions and normal opinions, because there's a few things, especially in this article, which seem to be kind of a consistent theme with not just only Need for Speed Payback, but other games this Luke guy has played from IGN. So if you haven't already watched the IGN review, I'm going to try to summarize it in this like little 10-second clip. It's not going to be 10 seconds, but you get what I mean. So Luke gave the game a 5.9 from memory. I might be wrong on that. I'm pretty sure it's a 5.9 he gave the game. And essentially he said that he thinks the game has taken 1 step forward and 2 steps back. So the guy that reviewed the game doesn't like the upgrade system, which again, I completely understand and I definitely agree with him to a certain extent on what he's going to say. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But as well as that, he doesn't like the linear police, which again, I kind of understand. But he thinks the map is very bland and the game just isn't that memorable as a whole. And he preferred 2015 story. And that is completely fine. Where my problems lie is where the critical opinion doesn't come over the just normal opinion, and we're going to talk about that right now. Number one, and I'm not going to go out and say that this guy doesn't want to play Need for Speed, because that's harsh on him and that's not really justified, but it does seem like there's an element of not wanting to play this for a long time. This guy gave Horizon 3 a 9. I just want to point that out there. The only reason I'm pointing that out there is because that game has like pretty much no progression. I'm obviously exaggerating a bit just to get my point across, but realistically, There's not any progression in that game to be had. You're not really working towards anything. You're your own boss. You have all the events pretty much unlocked from the get-go. You can pretty much buy any car from the get-go, especially if you played older Horizon through Forza Rewards. The game really has no progression, and he seemed to really enjoy it. Now you look over at The Crew and Need for Speed Payback, both games where they have this system of unlocking parts really slowly, well, not really slowly, but unlocking parts slowly, gradually building up your car and having this emotional attachment to your car. He didn't really like those games as much. Now, if I was one to speculate, I would assume that this guy doesn't like long form progression. Now, where I can agree with him is that I do think the upgrade system is a bit too punishing. I think especially for the roles you get, you should be able to pick at least more than one and maybe have more tokens for that, because then you would actually have the option of having a part for certain, even though it would be more roles, and that would be really useful. I also do believe that, you know, you should be able to pick the level once you've unlocked a certain level, because it just makes sense for you to do that and it makes the whole process a bit longer. I personally didn't have an issue with 2015's upgrade system. I do think that parts should have been a bit more expensive in that game, but as a system as a whole, I quite enjoyed it. And I can definitely see what he means by it becoming a bit grindy. But I think he over-exaggerates it to the point where it sounds like it's World of Warcraft. He compares it to mobile games, and yes, I get what you mean, but in mobile games, you've got to wait for like fuel to refill so you can play again. And it's also a lot less redeeming and rewarding. The way 2015 is structured, you don't have to just go and buy and roll and do that kind of thing. You can get parts from racing in events, doing bait crates, which I don't even remember him really touching on. I think he touched on it when he was talking about the linear cop chases, which again we're going to talk about in a minute, but it wasn't really something he emphasized. And when you're doing these events, it's a lot more of a fun way of actually unlocking parts. Didn't really mention that, and he was very heavy on the negatives. Now for me, if I was critically reviewing the game from what I've played so far, and don't worry, I'm going to be doing a review on the game, I would have said something across the lines of, yeah, it is a bit grindy. It is a bit grindy. Personally, I don't mind that, because I'm going to be playing this game for a very long time. But at the same time, you can unlock parts through other means than just buying them. The upgrade system, in short, is good for progression, but bad for builds. If you just want to build cars, this isn't the game for you. Go buy Horizon. That's how I'd explain it. But that's one thing. He didn't like the progression. That's fair. You know, whatever. If he doesn't like working towards things, that's fair enough. Because in the end of the day, that is what it is. It's long form progression. It's not Horizon where you can jump into a hurricane straight off the bat and, you know, go from there. You're going to have to build up. I'm still using my S2K and I've almost finished the game, and I'm determined to finish my game in my S2000. But, you know, put that to the side. Let's go ahead and talk about the linear cop chases. Again, free roam police. I get it. I completely understand. But this is what has me confused. Instead of mentioning the most important things to me, which we're going to list in a minute, he mentioned the progression and the cops. He didn't mention the broken online. He didn't mention the free roam online not being in there, which in my opinion is one of the things that if you're making a consumer review, you need to mention that, because that is one of the biggest things. What about the lack of new rims? You know, little things like that. It's very obvious that he doesn't play Need for Speed like that, and he's much more of a sim racer, and that's completely fine. But if you're going to review the game, at least get someone who knows what they're talking about. I've put over 1,000 hours into Need for Speed 2015, so I am more than certified to tell you what I think is good and bad with the game. From someone who has played Need for Speed 2015 an awful lot, I can tell you that the physics are not lazy. That's another thing that a lot of people have seem to not like, is the physics, and they're lazy. But in 2012, everyone was giving that game 9s, so I don't really understand where that's coming from, considering that was an easier handling model than what we've got now. Not only that, but people seem to think they're really good at this game. I can almost guarantee if I got into a lobby with half of these reviewers, they wouldn't stand a chance. And I'm not sure, I don't mean to just sound cocky, but it's one of those things. They think it's lazy because they're probably not testing themselves as much as they should. If they went online, they'd probably realise how much of a mess speedlists are, but as well as that, they'd probably realise they're not as good as they think they are. And it's not lazy, because there is a technique to it, and there is an element of, you know, mastering the tech. It's easy to pick up, hard to master. I use that saying all the time, but it really is there. I see a lot of people saying, oh, the drifting in Need for Speed 2015 is so unrealistic, the Need for Speed in Payback, oh, it's shit. But what you've got to keep in mind is, you say that, and you say it's easy, but you would never be able to beat my score. There's a lot more strategy to Need for Speed than people give it credit for, and that's one thing that really gets on my nerves as well. Again, it's coming in with the critical opinion versus your normal opinion. Just because this isn't Horizon, which it was never meant to be, it's an arcade game. It's not supposed to be realistic. It's supposed to be easy to pick up. Just because it's not Horizon, just because, you know, we haven't got wheel spin and traction control, doesn't mean that the game isn't suitable for the market it's going for. And this is coming from a business perspective. Just because it's not sim handling isn't a reason to mark down an arcade racing game. Knowing your audience and having this critical opinion is something which I feel like a lot of these reviewers lack, and I could go on for days talking about this one specific point. In short, you've got to separate what you like as a person. If you're a sim racer and you like sim things, you've got to separate that from your critical response. I love arcade races, but if I'm going in reviewing Forza, I'm not going to say, oh, I want break to drift because that's what I like, which I'm impartial to. But the point is, you've got to separate your critical opinion from your non-critical opinion. And coming from a sim racer, you can quite clearly tell that he doesn't like the break to drift system, and he doesn't like all of that. But also, you've got to separate that from what else you've said. And it also contradicts past reviewers from past games. For example, Most Wanted 2012 got a 9 out of 10, and that has a easier model than Payback, and 2015 for that matter. So again, it's one of those things, you got to separate the two. I don't feel like they're being separated, especially in the IGN review, and for the most part I am talking about the IGN review, and I'm sure this does go and apply to different places. But that's my first point, is they're not separated, and they really should be. So the next point I'm going to go ahead and talk about is a bit of a continuity issue with reviewers, and it kind of blends in with another point I'm going to make a bit later. It's kind of plot holes as well in the reviews as a whole, which just don't really make a lot of sense. A lot of this lies in the scores. Payback got a 5.5 or 5.9, I think it was. I'm pretty sure it was a 5.9. You go back to Rivals, I'm pretty sure that game got an 8. Right, so if we're going to break this down, Rivals had a smaller car list. It had no customization. It had what was arguably one of the most broken maps and just physics models in a Need for Speed game ever. Plagued with DLC. Like, it was disgusting. Obviously, on launch, you don't know that. But it was plagued with DLC. Truly, it wasn't a Need for Speed game which a lot of people were asking for. Hence why they made such a big change from then to 2015. There's definitely a big difference between those two games. And it doesn't take a genius to realize that there's a lot more content and a lot more things to do in Payback over Rivals. Yet that game still got a better score. Obviously, when you have different reviewers, your opinions are going to change, but when you're coming from such a large corporation like IGN, these reviews have to stay consistent. I can understand if your Underground 2 review contradicts a Payback review, because that was 10 years ago. But a game that came out in 2014 should not contradict a game that has come out in 2017, and a lot of the kind of problems which people had, well, they don't kind of cross over. For example, 2015, one of the negatives was it didn't have a pause button. Nor did Rivals, but Rivals didn't get penalised for that. Continuity is a huge issue in these reviews. A huge issue. A lot of the games that will get penalised now, like Payback, will get penalised for things that past games didn't have. No manual transmission was one thing which 2015 got penalised for, but Rivals didn't get penalised for that. Most Wanted 2012, which was a 9 out of 10, didn't get penalised for that. And it's one of those things, as a whole, I've really got nothing else to say, but this continuity is a huge issue, and this is something which needs to be solved, and I don't understand why big companies like IGN don't get called upon this, because it is such a consistent thing. Scores. Again, kind of goes into what I said with the last thing. Just a dumb way of reviewing games nowadays, putting an arbitrary score on things. Giving a score makes it sound like a game is better than another game, when realistically all you're doing, you're not telling the consumer whether to buy the game or not buy the game, or buy a game over another game. You're trying to review the game. You're trying to give a critical opinion of all the features and all the things which make that game, and giving it to the consumer in an attempt to give them a balanced opinion on why they should or should not get that game. And balancing is another thing, which we'll talk about in a minute, which I haven't actually wrote in my notes, but this is something which has just come to mind. In my opinion, scores should just be binned. I just don't like it. If you notice any recent reviews I've done on games, I don't give them a score on purpose, because I want you to make that decision. It's down to you for you to realise. One person's opinion, one person's score doesn't really work. You should give bad and good, negatives and positives. And I know that is something that is something which a lot of big publishers do, but giving it a score, it just, in 2017, for me at least, I think that's just not the way to do things. It makes it sound like some games are better than another, and when you have these big continuity issues, that just doesn't really make a lot of sense. You can't say this game is better than this game and then contradict yourself, because like, isn't obvious why you can't contradict. Like, it's right there. You can't say Horizon is great for this and then contradict yourself in another game and say it's not good for this, like in Need for Speed. Doesn't make a lot of sense. That's why scores as a whole are just convoluted, because things change over the years as well. what happens in racing games in 2014 is different to games in 2017. And still rating it on a system of 1 to 10 doesn't make a lot of sense anymore. Finally, we're going to go ahead and talk about the big divide between small publications and large publications. Not just that, but the kind of evolution of reviews and what people really kind of look for nowadays. Because being a YouTuber, obviously see this a lot. I see a lot of people, oh, can you review this game, or can you do this, can you do that? And I'm kind of on the inside in that way. I kind of see both sides of it. I'm a viewer, but at the same time, I'm also a creator, so I understand both sides of the argument. I like to think that I'll always be like that. I like to think I'm always going to be on both sides, always keep my pulse on the community, because that's something which is really important as a YouTuber to know. If you don't know that, you're not going to be able to adapt and evolve, and that's something which is really important to me. But if you look at this, you can see the big divide between the big publishers, or big publications I should say, and the small publications. I'm not sure whether it's because, you know, EA are pushing YouTubers now instead of them, possibly. I'm not sure whether it's because, you know, they are told to give bad reviews, because the way COD consistently gets 9s and 10s, and the way consistently, you know, Forza gets 9 out of 10s, and the way that Halo, a lot of the same brands, you'll see, like, a lot of the Microsoft games will consistently get high scores. As when you look at EA games, not so much. It's easy to hate on Need for Speed. And the EA specifically, and I can't remember who said that. I think someone said it to me a few days ago. But it's easy to hate on Need for Speed and EA because it's Need for Speed and EA. You see it all the time. EA, the worst company, this, that, and the other. And like I said, there's obviously going to be a natural bias here because they have invited me out to events, and I'm open with that. But I'm trying to come from a neutral standpoint of they've done amazing things with Need for Speed in the past few years. The fact they've given it two years development cycle. The fact in the last game all the DLC was free. Obviously that had its implications. The life cycle for the post game content wasn't as long as we wanted it to be. But the point is, EA is cleaning up their act, and I know people are going to consistently say, oh, they're using shipments to get all our money and stuff, and then all this kind of bullshit. But keep in mind, they're cosmetic only. It's like one of those things, and it's one of those things. You've got publishers out there like Activision who are literally putting guns in the new COD game that are already on the disc in supply drops through microtransactions. You know, you've got people like Forza who said they're going to add microtransactions after launch. So when they're in the review period, no one mentions it in the review period. And it's one of those things, honestly, EA aren't that bad anymore. Ubisoft, cleaning up their act as well. You know, I can sit here and say, you know, Microsoft's DLC and what they do with Forza is much more disgusting than anything's happened with Need for Speed. The fact that Forza probably has many cars on its discs right now, but you can't use them because they're locked behind a paywall, or maybe even just locked forever. I'm 100% convinced there's cars on Horizon 2's disc which are still locked, and they'll be locked forever. You know, like the MR2, the SWMR2 wasn't in, I think, Forza 6 or Horizon 3 before Toyota had the whole fiasco. But that's been in every Forza ever since. I just don't understand how that happens. Anyway, I've rambled on way too much there. The point is, you can tell there's definitely something going on which isn't natural when, you know, Microsoft games are getting high scores, EA games, for the most part, aren't. It's one of those things. The companies are changing, you know, they're becoming a lot more forward thinking, and with YouTubers and easy access to games now, you know, anyone can watch a Let's Play on a game, and if they like it, they can buy it. Reviewers are having less power, and maybe that's the reason why. Maybe that's the reason why, it's to spark discussion, and maybe there is a bit of, you know, politics behind it. But the point is, there's something a bit weird going on. There's something a bit weird going on. I think a lot of people are turning to YouTubers now, and that's maybe one of the reasons why reviewers are so kind of rash and so, you know, either for or against, and, you know, they have these unbalanced opinions. Like in the IGN review, it's constant negatives. There was no positives. For a game that got a 6, which is above average, like, you'd think they'd name a lot more positives than negatives. But for a game that got a 6, it sounded like it got a 3 from the way he portrayed everything. It just sounds a bit biased. And I feel like there's not a bias that's been, you know, there should be a disclaimer, or you get a reviewer who's completely open and says at the start of the review or something like, I usually play Sims, but this, you know, but there's none of that. in this. It seems like he's coming from a professional point of view, but he's not coming from a professional point of view, because there's many things I can nitpick about that review which don't really make sense. Anyway, I don't want to make this video too long. I've probably been recording for like 20 minutes now. I could go on for days about specific things he said here and there and nitpick, but I kind of wanted to generalize this video and give you guys the information so you guys can look for yourself. I did try to kind of narrow a few things down just to kind of reinforce my argument, but it's one of those things. Payback is not a 5.9. It's not worse than 2015. Make the decision, do it yourself really. Watch gameplays. If you like the way it looks and if you like what people are saying about it, you know, actual people saying about it, not big publications, then buy it. In my opinion, it's the best Need for Speed we've had in a very long time. From a critical point of view, it's the best Need for Speed we've had since Hot Pursuit 2010. From my personal favourite point of view, best since 2015. 2015 wasn't as good as Hot Pursuit 2010 from a critical standpoint. Hot Pursuit 2010 was a much more refined game. And in my opinion, Payback is 2015, but refined and worked on. And that's the best way I can explain it. I'm going to have a full review of Payback soon once I finish the game and I put a bit more time into it. I want to get a few days before I actually end up making my review. And that's another thing which a lot of these reviewers do. They don't really put a lot of time into it as they should just because they want to get it out as fast as possible. I'm not in any rush to get my review out. So it's probably going to be out in the next few weeks. But the point is, yeah, I just think there's something a bit weird going on. Anyway, with that being said, I hope this video hasn't been too long. I hope I haven't bored you guys. I hope you guys stayed till the end. If you have stayed this long, put in the comments, I like weed. Anyway, with that being said, if you guys enjoyed this video, if you did, make sure to go ahead and hit the like, subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next one. You guys have been awesome. Stay safe and peace.